Google offered one man $100 million. Not to hire him, not to acquire his company, to convince him not to leave Google. $100 million just to stay. He said no. He walked away. He started his own company, built it to a valuation of over $1 billion. And then, in the most absurd twist in Silicon Valley history, Google bought his company and brought him back anyway. Google literally paid for the same person twice. This is the insane story of Noam Shazeer, the most expensive engineer in the history of artificial intelligence. Noam Shazeer is not a typical Silicon Valley founder. He is a researcher, a true AI scientist, one of the most brilliant minds in the field of artificial intelligence. And for over 20 years, he worked inside Google, quietly building some of the most important technology the company ever created. Noam joined Google in the early 2000s. At the time, Google was still primarily a search company. But inside Google's research labs, a small group of engineers was starting to experiment with something new: machine learning, neural networks, the early foundations of what would eventually become modern AI. Noam became one of the key researchers working on these projects. In 2017, he co-authored one of the most important papers in the history of artificial intelligence. The paper was called "Attention is All You Need." This paper introduced the transformer, the architecture that powers every major AI system today. ChatGPT is built on transformers. Google Gemini is built on transformers. Claude, Llama, every large language model in existence uses the technology that Noam and his co-authors invented at Google. Noam did not just contribute to AI, he helped invent the foundation of the entire AI revolution. He was one of 8 authors on that paper, and almost all of them eventually left Google. But Noam's departure was the most dramatic. Inside Google, Noam continued working on AI chatbots. He and his colleague Daniel de Freitas built an internal project called MINA and later LaMDA. LaMDA stood for Language Model for Dialogue Applications. It was one of the most advanced conversational AI systems in the world at the time. Noam believed LaMDA was ready to be released to the public. He wanted to turn it into a product, but Google said no. Google's leadership was terrified of releasing AI chatbots to the public. The risk was too high. What if the chatbot said something offensive? What if it spread misinformation? What if it damaged Google's reputation? Google made $162 billion per year from advertising. The company could not afford a PR disaster, so LaMDA stayed internal. Noam and Daniel watched as their work sat unused inside Google's servers, while the world had no idea it even existed. They were frustrated. They had built something incredible, and it was being locked away. Then in late 2022, everything changed. OpenAI released ChatGPT. It exploded. 100 million users in 2 months. Suddenly, the entire world was obsessed with AI chatbots. And Google, the company that had invented the transformer, the company that had LaMDA sitting ready to go, was caught flat-footed. Google panicked. They rushed to release Bard. It was a disaster. Bard gave a factually incorrect answer during its first public demo. Google's stock dropped $100 billion in a single day. Meanwhile, OpenAI was dominating the conversation. ChatGPT was everywhere. And Noam Shazeer, the man who had helped build the technology that made all of this possible, was watching from inside Google, unable to do anything. That was the breaking point. Noam decided he was done waiting for Google's approval. He was going to leave and build the product he wanted to build. But Google did not want to lose him, and they made an offer that shocked Silicon Valley. According to multiple reports, Google offered Noam Shazeer approximately $100 million in restricted stock units to stay at the company. $100 million. Not as a signing bonus, not as a buyout, as a retention package. Stay at Google and we will give you $100 million. Think about that for a second. Google valued Noam so highly that they were willing to pay him $100 million just to not leave. That is one of the largest retention offers in the history of corporate America. It shows how desperately Google wanted to keep him and how terrified they were of what he might build if he left. Noam said no. He turned down $100 million. He walked away from Google, one of the most prestigious and powerful companies in the world, to start his own company with Daniel de Freitas. They called it Character AI. The idea behind Character AI was simple but ambitious. Let people create and talk to AI characters. You could chat with a virtual version of Elon Musk, Albert Einstein, a therapist, a personal coach, a fictional character, anyone. The AI would remember your conversations, develop a personality, and feel almost like a real relationship. Character AI launched in beta in late 2022, and it went viral almost immediately. Character AI became one of the most addictive AI products ever built. Within months, it had millions of users. Teenagers were spending hours every day talking to AI companions. People were forming emotional connections with AI characters. The engagement metrics were insane. Users were spending an average of over 2 hours per session on the platform. That level of engagement is rare even for social media apps. Character AI raised $150 million in a funding round, led by Andreessen Horowitz. The valuation was approximately $1 billion. Noam Shazeer and Daniel De Freitas had gone from Google employees to billionaire startup founders in less than 2 years. But there was a problem. Character AI was bleeding money. Running the AI models that powered millions of conversations per day required enormous computing resources. Compute costs were astronomical. The company was burning through cash and had no clear business model. They tried a subscription tier called Character AI Plus, but most users stayed on the free version. Revenue was not close to covering costs. Meanwhile, Google was watching, and they had not given up on getting Noam back. In August 2024, Google made a move that shocked the entire tech industry. They announced a deal with Character AI. Google would license Character AI's technology, and Google would hire Noam Shazeer and approximately 30 members of his team. The deal was structured in a way that let Google avoid antitrust scrutiny. They did not technically acquire Character AI, they licensed the technology and hired the team, but the practical result was the same. Noam Shazeer was back at Google. The company paid approximately $2.7 billion for the deal. Let that sink in. Google offered Noam $100 million to stay. He said no and left. He built a startup. Google then paid $2.7 billion to get him and his team back. Google paid roughly 27 times more to get Noam back than they originally offered to keep him. Character AI continued to exist as a separate company, but without its founders and core team. The product still runs, but its future is uncertain. Noam and his team are now working inside Google DeepMind, the company's main AI research division, building Google's next generation of AI products. This story reveals something important about how Silicon Valley actually works, and it is not what most people think. Lesson 1. Talent is worth more than anyone admits. Google was willing to pay $100 million to keep one engineer. When that failed, they paid $2.7 billion to get him back. One person. That tells you how valuable the top 0.1% of AI researchers truly are in this industry. Lesson 2. Large companies move slowly and startups move fast. Noam had the idea for Character AI inside Google. Google said no. He left, built it independently, and had millions of users within months. If Google had just let him build it internally, they would have saved billions of dollars and owned the product outright. Lesson 3. You cannot put a price on freedom. Noam turned down $100 million because he wanted to build the product his way without corporate restrictions. That freedom was worth more to him than generational wealth. And ironically, by taking that risk, he probably made far more money than the $100 million Google originally offered. Lesson 4. Google knows it made a mistake. The fact that they were willing to pay $2.7 billion to get Noam back proves that letting him leave was one of the most expensive errors in Google's history. They knew it, they fixed it, but they paid an absurd premium to do so. And lesson 5. Sometimes the only way to get what you want is to leave and build it yourself. If Noam had stayed at Google, LaMDA would still be sitting unused on Google's servers. Character AI would not exist. Millions of people would never have experienced AI companions. By leaving, Noam forced Google to take AI chatbots seriously. His departure changed Google's entire strategy. Noam Shazeer did not just leave Google and come back. He left, proved Google wrong, built a billion-dollar company, and then returned on his own terms with $2.7 billion worth of leverage. That is not failure. That is one of the greatest power moves in Silicon Valley history. Would you have taken the $100 million and stayed, or would you have walked away like Noam did? Drop your answer in the comments. I am Shadow Tech, and I will see you in the next one.